We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Batman issue 5. This is from the 1940 series and it is a facsimile issue produced in 2023. So while it does reprint the entire comic with the original ads, there are disclaimers in there, so it's not a perfect facsimile, but it's close enough. Like most of these books from the Golden Age, this has multiple stories in it, and the cover by Bob Kane is okay, but it seems like there's some wasted space and the giant wash of yellow seems a little boring. But the first story is The Riddle of the Missing Card, written by Bill Finger, with pencils by Bob Kane and inks by Jerry Robinson and George Roussos, who did the backgrounds mostly. Now this is the one, the Joker is back and he teams up with some crooks and they kind of go with a playing deck theme. So there's a guy named Clubby, because he hits people with a sap, so they call him the King of Clubs. There's a guy that is the King of Diamonds, and then the Black Queen, and of course the Joker. Now, there's an important element where Batman nicks himself shaving, and that kind of gives away who he really is. So the plan appears to be to rob people on this ship. Bruce goes in undercover as Bruce Wayne, and then Batman and Robin try and break things up, and it gets weird. The Joker tries to chop Batman with an axe because he's his most hated enemy, it says. Robin does some ludicrous acrobatics by tumbling somebody on his feet. There's a car chase, and eventually the Joker is able to capture Robin. Batman has to go save him, and at the last minute, one of the evildoers betrays the others because she's suddenly fallen in love with Batman and she knows who he really is because of the shaving nick. And just when it looks like things are resolved, the Joker is not quite done and he tries to escape at this lighthouse, and it looks like he may have died, but of course it's left very open-ended. A lot of people fall off things into the water at this time. I don't know why nobody figured out that the bad guy isn't dead just because he plummeted from like 50 feet into the ocean. No, he's probably still alive because it's happening a lot. It happens with Hugo Strange, happens with the Joker multiple times, and several other people. So, you know, it's not necessarily that they're dead, you just don't write them off yet. There's also quite a few panels where Batman's chest piece is missing. He's just wearing the gray shirt and the bat is just absent. So I thought that was a little weird. But then we get some little trivia things. There's True-isms, which have some negative depictions by today's standards of other cultures. There's something called the quiz box and sports shorts, and those are just little things to fill space. Then we get to another Batman story. This one is called The Book of Enchantment, written by Bill Finger, pencils by Bob Kane with inks by Jerry Robinson, and again George Roussos did the backgrounds. This time Batman and Robin find out that there's this missing girl and her dad's a mad scientist who declares that he is absolutely not crazy, but he built this machine that can send people into books because that's not mad science territory. So he has to send Batman and Robin in to find his daughter, and she can only be there for 72 hours roughly, or she gets trapped there forever, and this evil witch has kidnapped her. There's a lot of very obvious stereotypes. The green witch on the broom that's made popular by Wizard of Oz, and Father Time, that sort of thing. There's a couple of bad guys that they have to defeat, like this ice creature and this fire creature, and of course you can kind of predict how that's going to go. And then they run into a dragon and they blow its head off. I wish I was kidding. They actually explode its head. They meet Humpty Dumpty and some giants, and there's some ludicrous dialogue while they deal with that. Then they have to figure out how to get into the witch's tower, and it's fairly silly. And they have to fight her minions that do look a bit goofy, and one of them tells Batman how to defeat the witch, and they have to rescue the girl. There's also Jungle Fun, which is just a silly joke, nothing too spectacular. Then there's another Batman story, and this is The Case of the Honest Crook. Script by Bill Finger, pencils by Bob Kane, inks by Jerry Robinson, and of course George Roussos did the backgrounds. This time, Batman stops what appears to be a petty thief who was trying to steal $6. He didn't steal anything else that was worth more, he just wanted specifically $6. And it turns out that he kind of got a bad rap. He ended up doing some time for something that he really didn't do. He was going to help this gangster so he could get enough money to get married, but his girlfriend talked him out of it, and the gangsters in return framed him for drunk driving. So he had a criminal record, so he couldn't hold a steady job. Nobody wanted to hire him, and if they did hire him, once they found out he had a rap sheet, they fired him immediately. So he had to resort to petty crime, even though he didn't want to. Well, Batman sets about clearing the guy by taking out the mobsters that framed him, and he fights several of them while sitting in a chair. Then there's some goofy dialogue while he's beating people up and taking on these gangsters. Robin nearly gets himself killed, but in the end, Batman gets him to a doctor, threatens the doctor with death. Batman then goes out and takes out the bad guys by himself and takes 3 bullets in the process. This was probably the silliest story in here. The art's okay. It occasionally looks a little weird, but it's very of its time and for the era that it's in, when everything looks more like a comic strip from a newspaper. It's okay, but it's definitely the weakest story in the book. There's a prose story too called Too Much Knowledge by Clem Gordon. It's only 2 pages and I really didn't care about it at all. It's okay. There's some more jokes and some curiosity facts before we get to our final story, which is Crime Does Not Pay. Written by Bill Finger, pencils by Bob Kane, inks by Jerry Robinson, and again, George Roussos did the backgrounds. Now, Batman tries to take down some bank robbers with Robin, and he finds it a little weird that one of the robbers tries to defend one of the other robbers before Batman punch him, and Batman runs into a lady friend named Linda Page, and they seem to be getting along okay, but she's trying to talk Bruce into seeing that, there's good people out there. While she's clearly interested in him, he's more interested in stopping a bank robbery. So the bank robbers are at it again. One of them gets shot. They end up kidnapping Linda because she lives in the neighborhood, even though it's a bit sketchy of a neighborhood, and she's a nurse, so they can't go to a doctor because there's paperwork then, so they kidnap her, and Batman has to go find her, and thankfully she did leave a clue, and Batman goes undercover as Trigger Burns, but unfortunately the real Trigger Burns is known by the crooks here, so that doesn't go quite according to plan. Then Robin uses a few really highly ludicrous techniques to fight people, and Batman and Robin have to break up the robbery gang. Unfortunately, one of the gang members does not make it, and the one gang member that was being protected turns out to be the brother of another gang member. It's a little convoluted. He ends up signaling for the police, and the cops show up to assist Batman and Robin at the last moment. Overall, the last 2 stories are definitely the weakest. The Joker story was pretty fun, but all of the stories are clearly aimed at younger audiences. These are likely aimed at elementary age up to maybe middle school, but there's a lot of leaps in logic that you have to make and events that you just have to go along with, because otherwise they make no sense if you stop and think about it for more than 10 seconds as an adult. But the art's really solid in the first story, and the Joker looked pretty cool, and he's a lot more psychotic in these because he's trying to kill people with axes and stab them and knock them off lighthouses, things like that. And that story was absolutely the best one. The Land of Enchantment one, where they go into the fairy tale book, that story was okay. It was really over the top and ludicrously silly at times, but it had a lot of imagination to it, so I'll give it credit for that. And while the dialogue of constantly doing one-liners while you're fighting is a bit absurd, it does kind of work for the age demographic it's aimed at. So if you're looking to get a younger reader into Batman, this might be a good way to do it. These facsimile issues are expensive, but you do get multiple stories for the price. So while this is almost double the price of a single issue, it's better written and has more imagination to it than almost anything on the stands today. And while I may not have been a giant fan of the last 2 stories, they at least were fun to read. And I don't think I'd ever seen any of these stories before. So a lot of this stuff is hard to find reprinted for a reasonable price. You have to get omnibus books or $40 trades, that sort of thing. And a lot of people just don't have that kind of money, so you've never seen these. And I've never been super interested in the Golden Age stuff before, so seeing them is actually kind of fun. And they are really, really silly at times, but some of them are pretty smartly written, especially for the age demographic. It's hard to write children's literature, and having stuff that's this imaginative is really difficult to pull off. But as an adult, the last 2 stories just didn't work. The first 2 were way more fun, even though there's still some pretty over-the-top silliness to them. So I will recommend this because it does have a lot of fun historical value to it, and I would buy some more of the Golden Age reprints if they do these again. So if you get a chance to check this out and you have a kid in your life that you want to get into comics, this might be worth it for them, especially especially if you don't have a problem with gunplay and some violence. Kids like that sort of thing sometimes. So a solid recommendation. While the stories may not have appealed to me, I am far from the target demographic for this, and as a kid, I would have loved them. So that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.